Welcome to Around the Empire. I'm your host, Joanne Leon. Rod Phillips, also known as Rod from Philly, is here today for a discussion about the contested election. This is a fully independent podcast. Lend your support, patreon.com/aroundtheempire, paypal.me/aroundtheempirepod. Please like, share, and subscribe on YouTube also. On the weekend after the election, Rod Phillips and I got together to talk about our thoughts on the contested election, what we've seen and experienced in real life in the Philadelphia area, the bigger questions, and the impact on average Americans. And then in a bonus question, we talked about how we see this playing out, the corruption, and common ground, and what we would like to see going forward. Rod is a media analyst and the current producer on the show The Backstory. He's a former athlete, and he worked as an EMT for more than 7 years. We recorded this on November 7th, 2020. Rod Phillips is here. He's also known as Rod from Philly. A lot of radio listeners will know him by that name. And we're going to talk about the contested election. I guess we're now officially in a contested election territory. Rod is from Philly, so he's, familiar with that city, that state, things that go on there. But first of all, Rod, thanks so much for coming on the show to talk with us.
Oh, no, thank you, Joanne. I'm honored to come on and love to express myself to your listeners.
So, first off, since some people haven't met you yet, first time on the show, so just take a few minutes to tell us about yourself.
Oh, sure. I would say as far as the reason I'm on here and then how I became a little bit known is, like as you said, I'm from Philly, and my life, unfortunately, or maybe I guess now a little bit fortunately, has been connected to Philly politics, not through any cause of my own. It's just regular circumstances, being raised where I was, and so I've always been around politics, whether I wanted to or didn't want to be, and I just went about my life. I played a lot of sports. I played football, and I was good at it. I played football in high school, in a high school that's now closed in Philadelphia, Northeast Catholic High School. And as we speak, that school actually has a connection to Biden, and not in a good way. So you'll see I'm connected to politics just by happenstance.
Yeah.
And I played a little bit of college. I played a year of college football out in Minnesota, upstate Minnesota, and I got hurt, tore my rotator cuff, and I still was in school, and girls and stuff like that. So I stopped playing sports and got distracted. I became an EMT after high school. Right after high school, like a couple of weeks after high school, I started my certification training, and I believe by like July after I graduated high school, around that time I became an EMT and started working in August, and was a little bit over 7 years of EMT. Then after that, I got another job in the medical industry on the information side. Then I'd say 2016 happened, and President Trump came onto the scene, and at first I disregarded the candidate Trump, because I thought he was, I knew him as a guy from The Apprentice, and I'm originally from Queens, New York. That's where I was born, and then moved to Philly when I was very young. So I've always known Donald Trump, and it was nothing to do with politics. So I never took him seriously.
Same here.
Yeah, I never took him seriously, so I thought it was just a joke. But then I started to really, pay attention to him and see that the media they were misconstruing what he was saying. Like, he was actually talking to the people, and he was saying a lot of things people say that they don't hear from politicians. So, I started to really pay attention, and I started to look on social media for people who were honest in journalism. I've always been interested in things like that. I'm a historian. I just like to find interesting things, and you want to find people who will tell you the truth. So I ran across people like Lee Stranahan, who was working for Breitbart at the time. He was covering a lot of stories that people weren't covering, and I could tell that he was touching a nerve in DC. and in politics because he was telling stories that people don't know, and it's a reason they don't know it. And that connected with Donald Trump. And then we had the election, and then they started mentioning Russia, and I knew that was a lie. And then as we connected, I became a listener of Fault Lines, which started right after Donald Trump's election, and it was a great show. It was Garland Nixon, who was at the time of the beginning of the show was a Democrat, lefty, progressive. I don't think he's no longer a Democrat, but he's still a lefty. And it was Lee Stranahan, investigative journalist, who is I guess you could say Republican, more libertarian, and he's
Independent right or something, yeah.
right. And it was a great show. It was, and I worked sitting in front of a computer, and I can just I don't really talk to people that much, so I was able to listen to the show every day, and it was a show where you were getting a lot of information that you don't get from CNN or MSNBC or your local radio or any of the popular shows that people listen to or used to listen to. So I became interactive with the show and used to call in a lot and give my insight and my analysis. Then I guess I kind of became a citizen journalism after that because pretty much at the summer of 2016, a lot of people know the Seth Rich story, but at that same time, the Awan story broke, and that the story was so unbelievable to me. I couldn't believe it. It's like this, it was a Pakistani spy ring in Congress. It was like this. I was like, this is crazy. It sounds like it's something from the movies. So anyway, Lee started covering the Awan story and saw that it was real as well. And I actually went to the sentencing of the Awan, and I was able to see the circus that was. So and there was almost no one in the courtroom. So that's pretty much how. Fast forward. Fast forward.
Yeah, and then the Browder story and the Ukraine stuff I was already pretty familiar with, but once the Browder story started coming out and Lucy Commissar explained a lot of things, a lot of us who were listeners of that show and sort of active in the chat, like you and me, it started connecting some dots that I didn't understand, and just the whole story about how I don't know exactly who it is that's behind these people who's fighting things, but there are these factional wars being fought, and it goes like all the way back to the 90s when the Harvard boys did Russia, if you will, or any of that, and then this Browder character emerges, and yeah, it did seem like a movie. It did seem unbelievable, but it also made curious people search for other sources of information that and that's a what do you want to that's like a minefield because there's so much junk out there, so it is really hard to find people who are at least trying to find the truth. Maybe they get sidetracked on things that are not true too, but yeah. So I mean, that it was kind of a unique time in that whatever, like 2017, 2018 time frame when all this information was getting out there, and people, independent media, and even people who weren't officially independent media, they were just like researching things on their own. It became like a big crowdsourcing operation almost, and organic, which made it all very interesting, I think.
Oh yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And I'm as you're speaking, I'm remembering more things like WikiLeaks. I mean, and when WikiLeaks dropped, I think it was every other day, or I forget how they were doing it, the drops, but I was looking in the emails, and all you could just put in terms or people's names, and like I said, I'm from Philly. You can put in someone like Michael Nutter, who was the mayor at the time, and you see he's in the emails connecting with John Podesta and John Podesta's people about things going on in the city and deals, and so that's things like that were happening where everyday people were able to do that and still are, but we're more separated now because tech has put us all in our different silos.
Yeah, and suppressing a lot of people and suppressing a lot of things, which it's almost like they were caught on the back foot around 2016. And I guess that's one of the questions, not to change the subject completely, but oh well, we also should mention that. So you became a regular caller on that show and, interacting with a pretty large group of people in the chat to start to get to know each other. And then when there was a shuffle in the radio shows on Sputnik Radio, and then Fault Lines got two new hosts because there was a falling out. And then Garland ended up on a different radio show, and then Lee ended up with his own show, and then you became his producer. But in my view, you're more than a producer. You're almost like a co-host because he's solo. He asks for your commentary a lot. So we hear a lot from you too. So that's where you are right now, right? Producer and more on that show, right?
Yeah, that's right. And I met Lee in DC this summer after he had left Fault Lines and with a little breakup. And I met with him, and we spoke for about like 4 or 5 hours, and we just talked about a lot of things. Afterwards, time went by, and he got another opportunity to get a radio show, and he asked me if I wanted to be the producer, and I said, of course. And so now we're on the Backstory. I'm a producer on the Backstory, Rod from Philly, 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern on Radio Sputnik, on the radio and all over the internet, YouTube, Periscope, and all that stuff, and all the podcast sites. And it's a great show. It's a great opportunity. And I myself, as a producer, I seek a lot of people who are, like you said, are trying to even seek the truth, and I, get them on. And obviously, one of the people that I ran across, and I don't know. Sometimes it's fate. I don't know what you want to say. It's a synergy. His name's Matt Berman, and he's a creative designer, but he's in Philadelphia. And it's kind of the same story about all of us. Honestly, he saw the corruption going on in Philly the last few years, and he just took it upon himself to start asking questions, getting documents, and pretty much became a citizen journalist himself.
That's interesting. Yeah, I would say that kind of an awakening or something, I don't know quite what you call it, a renaissance sort of. I witnessed that happening on the left in the mid 2000s when certain blogs started coming out, becoming more prominent, and it was at a time when Bush was president and the energy against Bush was growing and growing, and the Democrats were resurging because the Clinton years were difficult for the Democrats, and I think they lost a lot of people. I personally have been sort of in and out of that party. I mean, I come from 3 generations of Democrats, Union family, Philadelphia. My parents both went to West Catholic. He went to Northeast Catholic. They both went to West Catholic, born and raised in West Philly back then. So I've always been, and I live right across the river. So I live in the metro area. You know how it is in New Jersey. There's parts of New Jersey that are really kind of New York, and there are parts of New Jersey that are really kind of Philadelphia. So, yeah. And in South Jersey, there has been a political machine for a very long time, Democratic machine. Now, it has its factions, right? They're not monolith. They fight with each other and things like that. But on certain things, of course, they will come together. But so I know what it's like I have a high tolerance, you could say. Not that I like it. I'm just saying I'm so used to it that I have a high tolerance for corrupt political machines, and I know what they're capable of. But even with my high tolerance, what I think I am seeing right now is unprecedented. Do you get the same? Like, I don't know. I don't see evidence in real life of all this wave of support, more votes than even Obama for Biden, but it is apparently happening. But the ballots are like everywhere, and I don't think I've ever seen anything like this. Are you seeing the same thing or what?
No, we're 100% on the same page. I guess you can call it an awakening. And like you said, you are from Philly and you know the area. And I was just talking about this earlier today, is that people do have in America, just because generations. I'm first generation American, so I look at America in its history, and I know its history well, coming from Philadelphia, and just that's the kind of the birthplace of the country as far as in law, and the Constitution. There always been like a tolerance for corruption, to kind of like with the look the other way, or it's kind of like you said when you talk about the Harvard boys clubs. There's always kind of like, well, that's just how they are. You just kind of let that be. But like what I was saying earlier today is that it's enough is enough kind of situation. They've gone too far, and especially with this election, if people let it happen and let this Joe Biden, or Kamala Harris administration come into office, there will never be a fair election in America, from the president all the way down to your local city council.
I was just saying that to a friend today in a message. I said, we lost our primary elections in 2016. I don't think there'll ever be a fair, but there was a fair Republican, at least as fair as they can get. They let a whole bunch of candidates run. They put them all on the debate stage. Yeah, they separated into different nights, but still they let them all speak until they, dropped out. And I don't think Donald Trump shows any signs of having some kind of an in with all the political establishments across the country. So I don't know how else he could have gotten in unless it was a somewhat fair election. So they had somewhat of a primary, a fair primary election in 2016. In 2016, the Democrats clearly did not have a fair primary. You know, we have documented evidence of that now that it was rigged against Bernie. And even then, they had a hard time rigging against it. By the time they got to California, like they declared the winner of the primary before the election was even held, they stopped doing exit polls, which are the best thing to really keep some kind of a check on in-person elections. But of course, we couldn't have those this time either because of all the mail-ins. But I think that what it looks like to me right now is that 2020 is the end of our federal elections. I just I felt like it was going to happen, but then when it did happen, I I was still surprised. So I unfortunately I agree with you that this is if it just stands and if in time there's not some kind of an investigation of it like a real one, whatever was left of our democracy I think is gone, which is a pretty hard thing to wrangle with, especially when you see, at least on television. I don't see it in real life, but I'm sure there are a lot of people around here who are, breathing sighs of relief and they're happy and celebrating in their homes. But I don't see any kind of public display of support for Biden. But I know it's there. I mean, I know members of my family sort of are by default voting. They're voting against Trump. They're not really voting for Biden. He might, he has some kind of support in this area. This is his homeland. But I do feel the same way. I keep saying that I hope I'm wrong. And maybe there was a giant wave for Joe Biden, but there's just a lot of there. It's being ridiculed, but there's a lot of anomalies. There's like, why didn't Joe Biden have coattails? How come that didn't result in a sweep? Like with Obama, they swept the House, the Senate, the White House, everything. Whereas Joe Biden supposedly get more votes than even Obama ever did. He's winning, red counties everywhere in weird ways. But like the Democrats are still losing House seats and didn't, so, at least not yet, gain control of the Senate. So that's odd. And what other kinds of have you seen has anything jumped out at you? Like what makes you think that this was a corrupt election?
Well, we live around it because when you bring up the DNC 2016 convention, which was in Philadelphia, it keeps coming back to Philadelphia. It keeps coming back to
Yeah.
Philadelphia, and there's something going on with Philly, and with what the country wants to go, and where the establishment and these shadowy figures want to take it, and it's something to do with our city. That's where they want it to start and pop off from, but it's not. It's not working because it's not organic. You don't. I've been up and down 95 this last year, maybe 100 times. Yeah, maybe 100 or less times. I've seen absolutely no support. I mean, little to none for Joe Biden, even in the state of Delaware. No billboards, nothing like that. So, I mean, if I would have seen something like that, like what it was for Hillary, I would accept like, hey, you know what, Donald Trump's. It was just too much for him to overcome, but it's not even close. It's just too much corruption. It's too in your face. My first grade teacher was her name was Mr. Street, and anybody listening who's from Philly, the name Street, well, the mayor was John
Yeah.
Street, and that was his ex-wife. And so, me not knowing, again, first generation American, this is the mayor. I don't think he was the mayor at the time. He became the mayor right afterwards, but she kept his name. She didn't want anyone else to get the name, so that tells you what kind of person John Street was, and that his ex-wife wanted to do that to him. And that he has a big scandal in the 2004 election in Philadelphia against Sam Katz. I don't know if you remember that.
I do,
And
yeah.
yeah, and there was a federal investigation into John Street and his administration. There was bugs found in his office because they were investigating him. And that whole election has been memory hold in Philadelphia, but there's a documentary on it, and I actually spoke to the filmmaker of it. This was years ago on it, so it's all ironic and coincidences. And Bill Clinton actually came to the city. I don't know if you remember, and that's when the big media cover up started coming because he came, and they started accusing Sam Katz of racism, and the federal investigation into John Street and his administration became overshadowed by accusations of racism. So,
And it worked.
of course, of course.
Mm. Yeah. I remember, I mean, I guess there was a Republican machine in, I vaguely remember the Rizzo years. But here's the question that I think about. So the same city, the same state in 2016, Trump did win that state. Now, not by that many votes, like 40 some thousand votes. So, but they were not able, if they were inclined to swing that election for Hillary, why weren't they able to do it, or why didn't they? Did you ever think about that question? I was thinking about that today.
Oh yes, I've actually thought about that a lot, and there was cheating in 2016. I don't know if you remember, Jill Stein put out in a fundraising, and they investigated a few states, and they found very little of it, but they found a couple states. I think Michigan, and Michigan's the one I know for sure. Maybe Indiana was the other one.
Yeah, there were some big things in Michigan, Detroit area. Yeah.
Right. And as far as 2016, they were just it was they were too confident. They were way too cocky. That's what it was. I mean, you can even read in the emails, again, the WikiLeaks, where they were going to pick out of Donald Trump, Ben Carson, and I forget the third person, of who they wanted to win and prop up and try to defeat the Republican Party for the
Oh, the
presidency.
Pied Piper strategy. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. So they were just way too confident. They didn't know exactly that Donald Trump was more savvy than the political establishment, because the political establishment is all Ivy League suck ups. So
Yeah, so they just weren't ready for the amount of support that he actually got. Like, I was thinking that may have been it.
oh, for sure. I mean, when Hillary Clinton came out and called Trump supporters half of them are basket deplorable and racist. That was really Hillary Clinton. That I mean, she wasn't cursing, but that's the real Hillary Clinton. That's what she thinks of America. That's what a lot of these politicians, they don't like us. They just use us to get in power and stay in power. And that was they didn't expect the amount of support, so they didn't ramp up the cheating to the extent that we see now.
Yeah. Uh, my that would be my guess. And I think that maybe they were better prepared this time, but from just anecdotal things that I've, like, my partner lives south of Philadelphia in a town down there that the town itself, I think, technically Republicans dominate there, but it's not that cut and dry. And he said that he waited. for an hour and a half. He arrived there at 7 o'clock in the morning when the polls open, just a little before 7, and he still had to wait in line for uh, more than an hour and a half, which just seemed like a big surprise because they had mail in voting too. So there was just a huge turnout. And then all through the day, on election day, I kept hearing about this surge of in person voters in Pennsylvania. And I think they maybe underestimated how many people came out this time too. I don't know. And that's why it took, I can't decide. That's why it took like so many days and why they changed the election rules the day before the election to allow themselves all kinds of leeway, all kinds of time to still receive and count ballots. And a few other weird things happened too. Like, I think it was 7, maybe it ended up being 10. 10 counties just decided not to count the mail in ballots on the day of the election. They could have, they legally could have, but they didn't. But all those counties were counties that Trump won in 2016. So I thought that was unusual. And what the effect of that would be to let's say that if those counties are still mostly pro Trump, then it would reduce the number of votes that Trump would seem to have on election night. So, but even with that, oh, I guess okay, so they still did count the in person ballot. So it still did look like he had a huge lead, but they held back the mail in ballots. Like, why? I don't know. That's just an anecdote. But yeah, I did hear lots of things about 3 to 4 hour waits in the Doylestown area. I didn't hear that much about Philadelphia precincts themselves, except I did see a bigger get out the vote effort than I've ever seen before in my life. Like they even like everything is politicized, like literally every single thing. They even politicized the football team, the Eagles, right? They had I think they had a voting station at the link, and they gave out special stickers like Eagle stickers, I voted or whatever, and then they sent players out to the different voting stations. So I don't know. While I was giving out free coffee, and maybe that's an election day thing, but there was food trucks going around, so there was a massive get out the vote effort, which that's all legal. I'm fine with that. But I was just surprised at the extent to which things were politicized.
No, you're 100% right, and you know I'm a big sports fan and historian, and I saw this politicization through sports years ago, and it a lot of people didn't see it, especially just regular sports watchers who don't like or don't aren't interested in politics. But I was telling them like it's coming. It's politics is bleeding into everything, and that's not good. We don't want to be a political nation, where you go to, wherever you religiously worship, it's political. Wherever you go to eat, you don't want to live like that. That's not the way you want to live. Certain countries live like that, and it's chaos at all times. But as far as what the city's been doing, I think they're very, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm trying to be nice, but they're not cognizant of what's been going on, especially since February, no, well, March, since the lockdowns. We've had multiple riots and looting, and crime has skyrocketed, and they're letting out prisoners from jail and prison, and it's making the place more dangerous. And they're thinking that at the same time you can ask people to vote, that they're going to keep you in power while you're keeping them in more danger. So they're not very cognizant of what they're asking for. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I've heard people speculate that the lockdowns were one of the sources of even more support for Trump, even though technically, he's the one whose officials put out all the information. But the lockdowns were all localized. It was the governors and the cities who made the specific decisions on lockdowns and things like that. That would make sense to me because he was really kind of playing both sides. Trump, his own officials were putting out all the numbers and all kinds of different measures that the White House task force was doing, the CDC. But then at the same time, he was being defiant of his own pandemic measures, which was strange. Sometimes praising different governors, sometimes indicating that, disagreement with them. It was really quite a weird dance to watch. But in 2016, the state was still controlled by Democrats, right? I'm trying to think.
That's correct.
Except I think is it the state Senate that is, I think the Republicans have control of that. Although I'm not exactly sure. I could look that up. Is it the same governor? Different governor, I think. I'm just gonna pause just to look this up. In 26,
Oh yeah, it was still Tom Wolf. It was still Tom Wolf.
it was Tom Wolf.
Yeah.
So even the same governor. Okay. So, but it was even the same Democratic governor in 2016. And yeah, it's just, I think you're probably right. It's just they were more prepared for it this time. Any particularly interesting stories coming out of Pennsylvania or Philadelphia that you noticed?
Well, the stories not necessarily, but characters, yes. We saw yesterday Jim Kenney, who's the mayor, come out. And Jim Kenney's the weakest mayor that Philadelphia's probably ever had. He came out and he tried to put out a little drama show and say that Philadelphia has never had election fraud and that President Trump's lying. He needs to put his big boy pants on and accept the results of the election. Well, a term that I just came across, or is more prominent to me now than ever, is called memory hole, and where you pretty much they're taking facts and they're just saying, well, oh yeah, that happened, but we're not going to talk about that anymore. And I think it was just last year, two judges in Philadelphia were indicted by the federal courts for tampering with votes and ballot busts, ballot stuffing. So they're now in prison. So Jim Kenney just lied to the country in one of the most important elections ever. But there's a figure standing right next to him on his left shoulder. It's a black man by the name of Darrell Clark, and Darrell Clark is the city councilman president in Philadelphia, and he's been the city council president for 20 years now.
Wow.
That might not, just for some people, it'll just be like, it'll just be, hey, okay, this guy's been the city council president for 20 years. But I've been doing a little investigating in Darrell Clark, and he's the district he represents, was the fifth district in Philadelphia, is the most important district, I believe, and it covers the most important parts of Philadelphia, which are including downtown. And Darrell Clark has no, usually these politicians, they have all these degrees, usually they're lawyers. All Darrell Clark has an associate's degree, so this guy's a very powerful person. He's the president of the city council of Philadelphia, and his only formal education is community college, which, we're not putting it down or anything. But as far as politics goes, usually these people have a whole bunch of degrees to show off, and you understand what I'm saying, to like show off and tell you, well, I got my master's in communication, but they obviously politicians can't communicate with us. But
So he spent his whole life in politics, do you think? Or did he do
his
something
whole
before?
I have no idea what he did before. He did work, and this is again, he did work as an aide for John Street. So pretty much,
Oh,
what I'm saying is this guy's was installed and has been installed for the last 20 years. He's been the de facto mayor. You understand what I'm saying?
yeah.
Uh, he's always there. I call him the Nancy Pelosi of Philadelphia. He's always there no matter what.
I see. So, city council, 1999, he took. Yeah, preceded by John Street. Okay. Yeah, he's been around for a while. Strawberry Mansion neighborhood, Edison High School. My uncle used to be a basketball coach there.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah. Um, he's elected a committeeman and he became an aide to John Street.
And
Yeah, it looks like his
he's
whole life in politics. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's also he's in charge of the public property and land. So in Philadelphia, we have a lot of old public schools. Some people say they kind of like castles at times. And if a lot of those public schools, they've become decrepit, they've become unable to. for students to be in. But magically now they're becoming apartments and condos, and the person who's in charge of that would be Daryl Clark.
I saw a man on the street type interview on one of the local networks, day before the election, maybe. And first, they had on a woman, like a middle aged woman in Center City, and she's saying, they're asking, what are the effects of the protests on you? And they're showing how all the buildings are boarded up. And she says something like, well, we all have PTSD from this, and they better start cracking down on this. Then they have another guy. I think he's on the street in West Philadelphia. He's just regular guy, also middle aged, just dressed in casual clothes. And he takes the microphone and he uses it to reach out to his peers, and he says, "Look, guys, like, don't be followers. Don't do this." And then he said something I thought was very prescient. He said, the big wigs are going to move in and buy up everything and push us out, because if he lives in that area, he has seen it happen, right? There's the whole University City area, or whatever they call the area around Penn and Drexel. They've seen a lot of the gentrification happening, and then they end up not being able to afford to live there. And so I just thought that was interesting too, that
Yeah, and I want to touch on that because you bring up something that's, when you talk about gentrification, it's not necessarily done organically, because what you're talking about, that's not organic. That's done through politics. And there's other politicians who have been at least indicted in the last year for land deals in Philadelphia. The empty lots where the houses get torn down, and when gentrification is one of the biggest forms of racism, because it usually happens to the most poor neighborhoods, of people who don't have who have the least voice. Look at Temple University. I know you're talking about University City, but Temple University, that was
yeah, I
it
know
was
that area kind of.
yeah, it used to be like a few blocks where you could go, and that was the Temple University. Now they bought up so much of it. It's it's almost its own neighborhood now, and they undervalued the houses to the people and gave them a little bit of money, and now they're triple the worth now.
Yeah, and I think that happened to Fishtown too, didn't it? Now Fishtown is like the place to move for kids, my people my kids' age, the 20 somethings. Everybody's moving to that. So there are areas that are becoming just completely rebuilt. But I felt bad for that guy, because he was putting his lifestyle and neighborhood above the politics of it. And maybe he just seemed to fear that these protests that they've been telling us were going to happen, they're using terms like, they were in the headlines, they were using ground zero. Philadelphia will be ground zero. I'm thinking, why would you ever use a term like that? Another headline said, early explosive early voting. And using those kind of terms around ground zero actually made me really nervous. The All the reporting that I've been seeing around Pennsylvania and Philadelphia from people all over the place, the Washington D.C. media network. I don't. I really hope that nothing bad happens. I don't know. It was really meant to put fear in our hearts. You know what I mean? I've turned off cable news for the most part, but because I'm going to talk to people, because I'm going to make commentary on it, I feel obligated to watch some of it, at least on the background and mute, so I can see the different, because, that's just as important as anything that anybody says, because things like CNN and Fox News are on in doctors' offices and gas stations and waiting rooms, everywhere. And they know that a lot of people see it without really hearing it. So they make those chyrons really big and prominent. I think that's maybe their main thing, the messages that they blast across there. And it was about 2 weeks ago, and I had it on, I think a day and a half. I had it on in the background for some hours. And they were talking about the pandemic on the rise again. And they were talking about, election and violence, protests that were coming, and everything was just meant to strike fear in people. And one night I actually had like a really terrible nightmare. I don't usually normally have. Thank God I'm not one of the people who has to deal with nightmares like a lot of people do, like combat vets and other people been through trauma. But I mean, that's the effect it had on me from not watching the news for a while to watching it for a day and a half. And I'm starting to have nightmares. So this fear that they're putting in people is just really unsettling too. I mean, it seems deliberate. I
No,
don't know if you got that vibe or not.
no, I totally agree with you. It's a lot of people have been saying that, especially since 2016. They've been spreading fear and chaos, and they want to sow division. That's just what the news is. They don't give you anything good. There's good stories. People should know. Obviously, there's a lot of good things going on. A lot of people who really want to help and really are helping and aren't doing it necessarily for fame or money. So I'm 100% with you on that. They don't give you anything good, and they don't give you anything really damaging their agenda. A lot of people were speaking today. It's November 7th. A lot of people are very turned off. Who are conservative or right leaning on by Fox News and what they've done with the election, how they've started calling states early for Joe Biden, and that's really turned off people. But as listening to fault lines and other media, that Fox has always been an organization that's been against President Trump from the very beginning. So they've been undermining him from the beginning, and also their listeners, their people who watch, and people call into their radio stations on satellite radio and things like that. So a lot of people are it's come to a crescendo where I tell people we really are kind of in the land of unknown, because there is no there is no prefaces. There is nothing we can look back and say, well,
Right, precedent, yeah.
yeah, there is no precedent to what we can say. Well, this is and one big thing would be because of the internet. Nothing else is kind of new in as far as in our generation. The only thing that is new is the internet. And with the way we can communicate, and we see that governments all over the world, and even here with big tech, that's how they've been controlling the internet. Especially now, it's way more constricted than it was in years past. And so, yeah, I'm 100% agree with you. They're just sowing fear and division, and I think we need to be prevalent. And I know a lot of people sometimes aren't religious, but not even in a religious sense, but just have faith in your common man, that they just want things to be have some type of normalcy.
So I got a couple more things. I don't want to keep you too long. You mentioned the judge, the former Philadelphia judge. I just pulled that out from the DOJ. So that was just recently in May. Former Philadelphia judge of elections convicted of conspiring to violate civil rights of bribery, convicted for his role in accepting bribes to cast fraudulent ballots and certifying false voting results during the 2015, 2016, and 2014, 15, 16 primary elections in Philadelphia. Dominic DeMoro of Philadelphia pleaded guilty in a sealed proceeding in March. And you said you think there's another one like this too. And yet the mayor of Philadelphia came out and said that voting fraud just doesn't happen there, right?
Yeah,
Even with this blatant evidence right in front of us. And I think it was fairly well publicized too. So there's that. And then you would have a better idea of this than I would. In 2012, there's a story in the Philly Inquirer that in 59 Philadelphia voting divisions, I guess precincts, Mitt Romney got a 0% of the vote. So 100% of the vote. Well, that was Obama. I mean, does that seem likely? Are there 60 precincts in Philadelphia where like not even one person would be even, I don't know, contrarian or whatever? Does that seem
no, it doesn't.
odd?
It doesn't seem plausible, and we're in that situation on a nationwide as now. But even in this election, when I look at the numbers as far as Philadelphia voting, where Joe Biden's just drowning out Trump. I was like, that doesn't make any sense. You understand? I know a lot of people personally and quietly, especially since the riots have happened since the end of May when with the George Floyd incident, and up until last week, I believe, when they rioted for a guy who was chasing the police with a knife and was beating up his parents and
Yeah,
his own sister called the police.
in West Philly, I think Cobb's Creek, maybe neighborhood.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and the mayor waited till the day after, or the day of the election to release it because he knew it would be damaging to the narrative of police shooting black men, hunting down black men. I mean, this it's all on video. He chased the police from one side of the street to the other. But to get back what we were talking about, it like I said, the mayor of Philadelphia, Jim Kenney's just he's he's a puppet to another puppet. You understand what I'm saying? So he'll go out and say whatever needs to be said to appease these radicals. I mean, I don't know if you remember when the judges in Philadelphia upheld the sanctuary city laws. He did a little dance and
I
posted it
do
on,
remember that.
and he posted it on social media for sanctuary cities. So he's just a puppet. I call him the Penguin from like Batman. He's just a puppet. His daughter got in a fight with another politician's family from New Jersey down the shore last summer. So he's a big mess. There's I don't know for sure, but there's rumors that he's a big drunk. So I'm just saying I don't know for sure, but there is rumors of that. And you would have to drink to lie to the people this blatantly. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I was just down the shore today. My partner and I just take a drive down every so often just to get away from it all and have lunch and walk on the beach for a while or on the boards. And we're on lockdown, but it's crowded down there. It's November. There was the parking lot in Ventnor right along the beach there was full. There were people all over the boardwalk. I didn't see one sign or any sign of celebration like I hear is going on. Now maybe people are just, but it was just like any other day. Earlier in the summer, I saw I think I've seen a total of four Biden signs. One of them was on a bumper sticker in Margate on a Mercedes-Benz coupe convertible, and the other three were in Ocean City in an area with the large houses along the water. But everything else that I've seen has been Trump, and my partner said the same thing. And he comes over here from Philadelphia almost every day, and it's Trump signs. And today there's not one political sign for either candidate in my neighborhood, but just outside my neighborhood on election night, no, the day after the election, somebody had set up with like Halloween with like Christmas lights, really like rope lights, and their clothesline they made a lighted Trump sign, and there are a number of other Trump signs around here. So it's a cognitive dissonance kind of thing. I just don't see this giant wave, particularly not the more votes than Obama thing, and this wave in Pennsylvania. We're just not seeing the evidence of it. There's been a lot of talk about shy Trump voters, but I don't know. It looks like there are a lot of invisible Biden shy Biden voters too, and they all do mail-ins. I know that's the only thing I can conclude from it. I'm not buying it. I'm really not.
Yeah, it's just out of control, and we're in the area, and we know. I personally didn't know who Joe Biden was in 2008, 2007. I had heard his name just because living in the area. And I wasn't a big political person, but just because of my life and around politics. But even Barack Obama says when he runs for president, he's like, I didn't know who Joe was, but he was, he was just recently a senator in in the U.S. Congress. So even the guy who was in the Senate with him didn't know who Joe Biden was, and now they're trying to tell you he's more popular than Barack Obama was in 2008 and got more votes than any other president ever. It's like I said, I was about to say this. The Democratic Party used to be the party of the people for some time, and honestly, this is how I see it would have went if they just would have gave the people somewhat of what they wanted. They probably would accept the corruption that's going on right now. That's how I see it. But they've totally left the working class, the poor. They just left them in the wind, and now they're the elite. They're the New York limousine liberals. They're the people who tell you they're from New York, but they live in Long Island. They're the people that tell you they're from Philly, but they live over in Bryn Mawr and Bala Cynwyd, over the other side of City Line Avenue. So these are the people who are the Democrat now. They're the elite, and they don't care about regular people like you and I.
No, I think that I have to agree 100% with that. And I think that they could have had this landslide wave election pretty easily if they had just served the interest of their base, even just at 10%, even just a little bit, instead of just lying all the time and just this big theater of being for the people. And Joe Biden is already talking about bringing Republicans into his administration. I didn't confirm this yet. I was reading a little bit about his transition team. It's led by Ted Kaufman, who's basically a right hand man for Biden for a really long time. That's who he appointed to serve in the Senate temporarily before when he was elected. I actually met Joe Biden in person one time, and it was right after it was in January of 2009, so just a couple of months after the election, but before the inauguration. It was the day that Congress got sworn in, and we were going to Washington, and we went to the train station in Wilmington because my partner likes that better. It's less crowded than Philadelphia. So we go to, and there's a big Joe Biden. I did know who Joe Biden was, but here's how we knew him. You know how they say, like, Senator Casey, D hyphen PA, that's the symbology for how they describe senators. The party, the D is the party, and PA is the state. Well, I mean, the standing joke about Joe Biden was his symbology was Biden, D hyphen MBNA, which was a bank, a big bank in Delaware. I mean, everybody always knew that he served the banks and the credit card companies. That's just who he was. He's a machine man, like from the start. So it's it's not surprising that he wasn't known and well loved in the area. Not at all. I mean, he kept getting reelected, but yeah, that's Delaware. I don't know if I really understand Delaware politically. But so his transition team's being led by Ted Kaufman, and they've already started to talk about bringing Republicans into it and, compromises and all that, which is going to mean probably that he'll go right back to his austerity measures. I don't know why he would change the way he's been for his whole life. But I also heard that Dick Cheney was advising him. And here's the thing that shocks me more than anything. The Biden coalition is the quote unquote never Trumper coalition. It includes people like Bill Kristol. The support that they got was from, it looks a lot like the Iraq War coalition to me back then. And if you weren't following back then, that might not be that familiar, but it's really kind of shocking. And to come back to your original point, it wouldn't have been that hard for them to legitimately win an election like this. But that was never even on the table. That was, they want it, but they don't want to do the small things, the small concessions that they would need to do to get genuine popular support and populist support. But, we're just going to pretend that it's there now. We're all just going to have to believe that it happened, I guess.
No, you're 100% right on. And I do remember the people of the Iraq War and the people orchestrated that. And yeah, it's as far as the Democratic Party and seeing it in Philadelphia and the unions. I mean, the unions really run the Democratic Party in Philadelphia, and But yeah, that pretty much Joe Biden is Iraq War. He's been around for every war in the last 19 going on 20 years. And if people see his, I guess, whatever you want to call it, acceptance speech earlier today or yesterday, he said, God bless our troops. Well, Joe Biden's one of the reasons our troops are over there. There is no mission. They say, well, we're fighting terrorism. Well, terrorism is here in America and it's named Antifa. So shouldn't they be here? You understand what I'm saying? Like, it's a vague, you're giving vague answers to very big problems. And we see our troops. I mean, anybody can come to Philadelphia, and I'm from the Kensington area, and you come to Kensington, and a lot of those heroin users are former military. A lot of the meth users are former military, and they're out there in the street doing drugs in open air market because Philadelphia has an open air drug market, and their lives have been destroyed after they come back from the war, and that's Joe Biden. So when he says God bless our troops, I don't know what God he's talking about, but God wouldn't send our troops to fight these bankers' wars. Like you said, Joe Biden is the bankers' guy.
Yeah. I don't know, Rod. We might be in different places politically or something, but that common ground with people who really just don't even want that much, just want people to tell us somewhat of a truth and have things be somewhat fair. But even that's too much to ask for now.
Yeah, I mean, even the Republican Party. I mean, let's not get it twisted. The Republican Party is just as corrupt.
Yeah,
They're just
exactly.
they're just more kind of corporate corruption. But the only reason the Republican Party has any relevancy in America right now is because that's where the people are right now. They've kind of taken over the Republican Party in a way. I mean, you see it. It's very organic. A lot of people have run as Republicans in their city, their town, for Congress, and they're winning because people are tired of the Democrat and how the Democrat parties went. But it's not the Republican Party; it's the people in the party. If the people left the party today, the Republican Party would collapse.
This is a good time to move over to a bonus question because I just want to get your thoughts on how you think this might play out. But also, what you just said reminded me of something I was thinking, like the Bernie movement. A lot of people saw that as being all about Bernie, but having gone through sort of the politics of the rise of the blogs that challenged the media. There was like a battle between the media and the blogs, and then it's when the internet was on the rise and social media was coming around and all that. And then after the bank bailouts, Occupy Wall Street rose up. That was a broad coalition. It wasn't just the left. And there was also the pushback when WikiLeaks came out, when Snowden came out. There was also a broad coalition of across the political spectrum people against all the surveillance, the mass surveillance. So Bernie walked into a movement. And I'm wondering now, a lot of the Trump movement seems to be about the man. It's certainly painted that way. But there was also on the right and independent right, there was an organic Tea Party before it became sort of co-opted by the party. So going forward, what's your best guess, or what do you think is the possibilities for how this is going to play out? And do you think that the Trump movement will die without the man, or will it exist out there waiting for another leader or ways to organize? And if you call it loosely, if you call it a populist movement, that's kind of what the Bernie movement was too, loosely populist. Not the derogatory way that the word populist is used, just the of the people, just more grassroots of the people. Like, how do you think this might play out with those two things in mind? Answer the bonus questions in a bonus segment for patrons. You can get access to those bonus segments. There's one for almost every interview by subscribing at Patreon. Plus, you get access to other patrons only episodes, to our new Discord channel where we talk among ourselves. And that's my tease, and I hope that some of you will join us. I'll continue now with the interview wrap up. There are other people who seem to really want not just a divide, but blood on the streets, and I just hope that doesn't happen. I really hope that doesn't happen. Any last thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I'm just honored that you had me on, Joanne. It was great being talking to you, and hopefully your listeners get a little insight. And obviously they're probably a little local, so a lot of things will resonate with them. And you know, somebody asked me the other day, what do I want to happen in a city like ours of Philadelphia, as far as politically? And I'm not talking violence wise, but I'm talking about just the structure and what's been the establishment. I want to see the political structure locally for us where we come from, Philadelphia. I want to see it burn. I want to see these people like the Rendells
Yeah.
other other people who've been the establishment in Philadelphia. I want to see them run and leave the city and never come back, and just let us try to figure this out and make things better for ourselves.
Yeah, I think that's the common ground is the anti-corruption and the just, desire for people who will treat us even slightly fairly uh to bring into power. And this machine is so huge and so corrupt. It's a daunting task, but I feel the same kind of energy that you do, and I appreciate you coming on the show to talk. Let's do talk again. And I'm all about common ground for basic things. That's all we really need to is just find some common ground on some basic things and not fight each other for the benefit of people who don't give a shit about us. Don't have our best interests at heart. That's really kind of my really, really fundamental, basic feeling about the whole thing.
Yeah, no, and last thing I would definitely want to say is, I was EMT for 7 years, and about 2 years ago, not this year, but 2 years before, I was doing Lyft. So that's about 9 years of interacting with random people. Obviously, as an EMT, not good situations, but as a Lyft driver, once in a while, you meet people and you talk to them, and I believe we have way more in common than we do uh, than we not. And I think, like you say, just on a basic level, we just want things to not be chaotic and not be fighting, and we don't want just violence and all this other stuff that's been going on this year, just rampant in our country and in our neighborhoods and stuff like that. We just want some type of normalcy and to work and be able to work things out organically. And so that I believe that can be done. It's not impossible. It's not something that's out of our realm or the generation of as far as us living, but it's something that's going to be generational to keep it going, because there is, like you say, powers that be, people that shadowy figures with a lot of money that have a lot of influence, and money is the root of evil. So it only takes a little bit of money to start that evil.
Yeah, they don't want to be the target themselves, so they love it when people fight them up. The divide and rule thing.
Yep, 100%. And then we're living it right now. They've tried to do the racial thing this whole last year, and as far as with police shootings and pinning black against white, and I don't think it's worked out the way they thought. Again, they're Ivy League suck ups. They don't understand the common person. They don't like us. They don't like you and I. They just like using us.
All right. Well, next time we're in the same vicinity, let's have coffee or something, and please do. Let's keep in touch and let's talk again about this whole thing.
Thank you very much, Joanna. I love to happen, and we'll definitely be on soon to talk to you again.
Okay, great talking with you, Rod. Take care.
You do the same.
Thank you for listening. Special thanks to Rod Phillips. Follow Rod on Twitter at RODR_76. This podcast is independent media, so listener support is really important. Patreon.com/AroundTheEmpire or PayPal.me/AroundTheEmpirePod. Find it on any mobile podcast app, on the website AroundTheEmpire.com, on Patreon, or on YouTube. If you're listening on YouTube, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Follow on Twitter at Around the Empire, and we'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.